Scrutiny Working Group public engagement. What I'd like to do is to, first of all, for the benefit of the people online, there are just 3 of us in the room. So we can possibly introduce ourselves so you know who's actually here. So those of you, well, you all know me, but for better or for worse, Lyndon Jones, and I'm chair of the Scrutiny Working Group Public Engagement. And to my left,
it's Rachel Percival. I'm the Scrutiny Officer.
And
I'm Lee Wenham, Head of Communications and Corporate Planning and Performance.
Great, thank you very much. Rachel, are there any apologies?
We've had no apologies, Chair.
No apologies. Okay. Then you get the disclosure of personal or prejudicial interest. Do members have any interest? No. And if there is, you find it during the course of, please let Rachel know. Then you've got the prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. And then we have public questions. There are none. So no public questions. So we move on to the public engagement report. And could I welcome Lee Wenham, the Head of Communications, Corporate Planning and Marketing. Welcome. Lee is in the room with us. And Amy Richard Jones from the Mid and West Wales Fire Service, who looks after communications for that authority, who will come in after Lee. We are expecting Councillor Rob Stewart, but he hasn't arrived yet, but may well join us during the course of. But what I'd like to do is to kick off and ask Lee. I think everybody will have read the report, but if you want to give a bit of a resume, and then we can go on to questions, and possibly if the leader arrives, ask him if he obviously will want to comment. Thanks. Okay. Lee, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presented to today's group just looks at the way we engage the public, both from my team that works on a corporate basis and how individual services work. And it's a kind of 4-pronged approach. It's about information, where we just provide information to the public in a one-way kind of informative way to make them aware of something. Consultation, where we decide on a series of questions and go to either the public as a whole or to specific groups to seek their views. Participation, where we listen to people's lived experience to help us in our thinking and decisions. And co-production, where we actually work with people and share power in the kind of decision-making process. So those are the 4 strands in terms of public engagement. The report sets out some of the kind of main themes and initiatives that we have. And what we've seen in my time in the council, probably the biggest single change to the way we engage the public is the demise of traditional media and the growth of things like social media. So that's had a big bearing on how we engage the public. It makes it easier in many ways. It also provides some challenges as well. So a kind of engagement that uses social media quite heavily and digital platforms. We're quite successful in the way we engage the public. We hold a series of events and surveys throughout the year corporately, so we can gain views on things like the budget, our priorities, our performance, and individual services will do their own thing, which is very service specific, and they'll consult and engage service users in a range of ways, which are given some examples in the report. The report also acknowledges there are some areas for improvement. So at the very back page of the report, it's always about engaging hard to reach groups. I suppose that's why they're called hard to reach groups. It is difficult to engage them, and we are looking at that this year in the coming civic year to see how we can improve the way we do reach those underrepresented groups. And we will be perhaps working with yourselves as councillors as well as community networks to try and reach out and engage those groups. Feeding back to the public. So ensuring that we make the public aware that we have listened to them. It's all very well asking them what they want, how they feel about things. If we as a council don't listen and respond to that, then what is the point in the first place? So we're very keen to highlight where we've changed or introduced something on the back of what the public is telling us is important to them. And also survey user perspective. We've been working with Audit Wales, and they produced a Wales-wide report as well as a Swansea-specific report, which talked about how we as a council can learn from service users in terms of our performance, how we deliver in services. So we're looking to improve that in the next 12 months as well. So that's a summary of the report. I've also, Chair, had a number of questions from members. There were 16 in all. I can kind of summarise some of the answers if you like, and I can also then follow up with some correspondence to Rachel in written format so that all members can see the written response to each of the questions, if that's helpful.
Yes, yeah, no, fine. Thanks, Lee. I think we've had a number of, as I say, a number of questions. Useful, probably, to maybe link some of those together. Rachel's very kindly given me a list here, but some of them may not be in the order that you may have seen them before, so it might be worth me going back to that list, actually. If you bear with me just one second. Yeah, but basically the first question was, basically the first question was in paragraph 5.2, and it references gathering the views of young people. How do you actually do that? Because it is obviously they're an important group, and it's important that we listen to what they have to say.
That's primarily done through the Children's Rights team. So that's not my communications team. And they hold something called the Big Conversation. And during 2025, there will be 5 events. I think the first one was held in January. The next one is due to be held in March, and they usually theme them. So in January, the theme was attendance and behaviour in school, and also the cultural services offer from the council. So it's primarily done through the Big Conversation events, which have been running for quite some time in Swansea.
Fine, thanks. Because I say it is an important group that we, you know, that and it is really important that we do listen to what they have to say. Great. The second question was Peter. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, you don't therefore directly engage with schools. I'm just wondering what use is made of the pupil forums when they're collecting views of young people, and you know, when you do engage with school, it isn't just about the school education you engage with. What about the wider city as a whole?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Black. So the primary sector and secondary sectors both have their pupil forums, which do deal with school-related issues. So that tends to be dealt with at a school level. But we also then have county-wide kind of forums for our pupils, but it's also around the Big Conversation, so they're encouraged to feed any comments or views or questions into the Big Conversation. So that really is the kind of key forum for getting those views from our pupils.
Peter, do you need to?
No, that's fine. It just seems to me that there is this gap in terms of when we do carry out consultation, that we don't seem to always reach the younger people in that way. So I'm just trying to think of ways in which we can do that. And obviously the pupil forums and is one way that can be achieved in terms of the more wider consultations. So yeah.
Hey, Peter, you're on again. You're on again, Peter.
Yeah. Right, moving on to social media. I mean, obviously the council is very active in social media. I was just saying in the pre-meeting that I'm particularly impressed in terms of TikTok and Instagram, that you've got a very good presence there, some very imaginative and useful posts on those particular fora. Obviously we use Twitter. I refuse to call it X. We use Twitter. We use Threads, but we're not using Blue Sky. So I'm just wondering why are we not doing that one, particularly given what's happening with Twitter at the moment and how toxic that is becoming, that maybe we should be using all the channels.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Black. It's a really good point. It's something we're monitoring on a weekly basis, really. The stuff that's happening in America is causing everyone some concern in terms of things like Facebook and Twitter. So we're monitoring that to see how that affects our activities. We have looked at Blue Sky. I think it's one of those platforms that's emerging. The numbers are still relatively low. So it's not one that we've dipped our foot into yet. TikTok was quite a recent step for us last couple of months. So we're focusing at the minute on not just our existing platforms, we're building up TikTok. I think that we haven't reached the point yet where Blue Sky has enough followers for us to put resource into that. But as I say, we are looking at this weekly, and it might be that Blue Sky is our next protocol. So we're just keeping an eye on it. But thank you for flagging it to us.
So what number of followers is the tipping point?
Well, I think across the UK they have 3.5 million, whereas I think Facebook is something like 23 million. I can't get figures for Swansea,
No,
but it
obviously
would
not,
need
no.
to increase somewhat. And there are some other issues with Blue Sky as well. But we are keeping an eye on it. I think as the platform develops, it may well be part of our suite of social media platforms.
I think I've seen-
TikTok, to give an example, TikTok back in the summer, we started looking at it and then we kind of adopted it in November. I think TikTok was previously seen as a platform for 12-year-olds putting their dance videos up. It's changed. The demographics using TikTok has completely moved more towards people in their 40s. So I think once we see what's happening with Blue Sky, maybe in a couple of months' time, it might be something that we start to use.
Yeah. Presumably, I mean, I think Blue Sky's got at least 20 to 30 million, but I presume most of those are in the States, then, in that case.
Yes, it is.
As opposed to the UK,
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of social media, I mean, we put a lot of posts up there. We put posts up there to take people to other areas of the council website, for example. Do we ever use polls on social media to? I mean, we're doing a consultation at the moment on the budget, which I've just filled in. But and one of those examples is on the waste collection. On the question, do we ever do a poll on our social media platforms to try to engage people beyond that questionnaire, which can be quite daunting for someone who wants to give an opinion on that?
Yeah, it's not something we used a great deal up until this point. We've used it very sparingly because you don't get a representative response and it can be hijacked. So we are cautious about how we use polls and what kind of credence and credibility we can give it. But it is something we will look at again in the future with social media and how we use it, whether it's videos, polls. We're almost constantly reviewing it. So, but there are some kind of issues with doing an online poll. It's about how accurate and useful it actually is the biggest problem.
Totally understand that completely. I'm going to skip a question to do a follow-up to this one, because clearly, I mean, I understand a poll on social media will be very unscientific. It just gives you a snapshot of what's going on. I mean, what about using more structured polls? I mean, like online polls such as YouGov or something like that. Do we use those sort of facilities?
We don't use YouGov at the minute, Councillor Black. It's mainly because of resource. So it is something we will look at again, and it's just a movable feast for us and something we're always kind of looking at.
I'm not sure if there's. I mean, there may well be other online polls which are available as well.
Yeah.
Which I understand YouGov involves a cost, and I think the leader's just going to talk about the cost now. Which I see his hands gone up.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Apologies for being slightly late. I was delayed in my previous meeting. No, just on this point, the point I was going to make on it was a slightly different one. I think, as long as it's something that will give us value, then, as long as it's a reasonable cost, it's something we can explore. I think one of the concerns about all of the online types of polls is, of course, they can be hijacked by groups not local to Swansea and for people who may have an interest in a certain topic but are not Swansea residents. And I think that's been one of the challenges for us, is that if we're polling on Swansea issues, that we get the views of the Swansea residents and not therefore a diluted version of what people think, which may not be reflective of Swansea residents. So it's that technical bit about making sure that we hear the voice of the Swansea residents rather than something that might be a much broader response, which is easy to do on the internet. We know the chat, that bots and all other things can be used to hijack surveys. So again, if we're doing a test of public opinion, we want it to reflect what Swansea people think.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, Rob. Yeah, thanks.
Great, thanks and welcome, Rob. Would you like to say a few words as well, because to give an overview of the subject?
Chair, I'm assuming Lee has already covered it, so at the risk of repeating him, I'll decline that one. But happy to take any questions anybody may have on this. But I'm pretty sure Lee will probably already have introduced the main points.
Oh, he has. That's great. I just wondered if you wanted to say anything. But I think the point you make about we want the information to be Swansea specific rather than, views from elsewhere. And we also need to bear in mind that we don't want people to, obviously some people will, answer the poll a few times as well, and that skews it as well. And I think that is equally important. The next question is back to Peter. Peter.
Yeah, thank you. This is a slightly different thing. I mean, we carry out a lot of consultations, and I know when we've had scrutiny before, we've looked at consultation, we've bemoaned the low response rate on many consultations and questioned how they can be representative when the response rate is so low. So I'm just wondering, have we carried out any research recently into the best, most successful ways of maximising, increasing response rates? Are there any new methods or new learning in this area the council can apply?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Black. So we know that there are a number of factors which kind of affect the response rate. So the survey topic, for instance, we recently did a survey on dog ban along the Swansea Bay Beach. We had more than 4,000 responses. When we did something on flooding in West Cross, we had 13. So we understand that there are issues there which will kind of engage the public more than some others. So it's about the topic. The survey length, we know that shorter surveys get more responses and better promotion of the survey. I think also more timely surveys as well, because when we know there's an issue which is affecting the public or they're kind of excited about, there's an opportunity for us to do some survey work then. But also as well using or making better use of our networks and groups where we work with networks and groups related to an issue, then again they use their kind of tentacles to reach out to their members and beyond, and then we get a better survey response. So it's all of those things. This topic, it's the length, it's the way we promote it, it's about how we work with groups, etc., and perhaps being a bit more timely and catching the wave at the right time. So we bear all those things in mind for the next 12 months.
It's interesting, the response on the dog ban survey, because this is a case in point, because I know that my colleague Sam Bennett, who represents Waterfront Ward, had a lot of casework on this. And when that survey came out, he actually wrote to every one of his constituents and highlighted the survey to them. And that may well have increased the uptake and the response in that survey. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting you write to every member of the city and county of Swansea, every constituent, but certainly when you have highlighting it in some way or other may well get a better response rate.
Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Black. So that goes back to the areas for improvement which I touched upon earlier. And in the next 12 months, we do want to be working with our councillors. You have great links within communities. We want to kind of work with you so we can better promote surveys. And I think what you've given there is a great example of how that worked, but we could do that more often.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I think everybody, all the councillors, have a responsibility to get that out, really, and it is, it's something that we need to do and be encouraged to do. Peter, you're the next question, and then I'll go over to Leslie. It was the Sorry, I've missed my line. Yeah, Leslie, you raised a number of points. Would you like to kick off?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just before I kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that I fed a lot of comments in about surveys over the few months, and I know that I've worked with Lee and Rian about them. This is really just to see partly where we've got to on some of these things. One of the things I find when I try and do one of the surveys myself is sometimes the preamble isn't easy. It's not that sort of easy read, and I think sometimes that can be quite off-putting. I don't know whether you want to comment on that, or do you want me to say all the things I'm mentioning first and then comment on all of them?
Want to do that, Leslie?
Yeah. Okay. Another one is always this point about whether you're forcing somebody to answer a question. I know from personal experience, if I get stuck on a survey,
Leslie is frozen there. Yeah, Lee will pick that question up, and hopefully
Can I just
Leslie...
add, Chair, in terms of Leslie's point, that when I did the budget survey, the first 3 or 4 pages were all preamble, and it is a bit off-putting even to me. And I think that is a valid point.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And I was going to say to Councillor Walton actually that I've been working with Waste on an upcoming survey because there was a quite detailed preamble, so it's about simplifying it. I think the budget one, there was quite an extensive preamble. We need to review that. It is getting that balance right between people who for the first time might be engaging in what the budget is all about, but absolutely not putting them off. You're right, Councillor Black, and maybe the balance wasn't quite right this year, and we'll make sure we do that. Some of the other points Councillor Walton was going to ask was around simple to read version, so it goes back to that preamble as well as the questions. Also about giving a kind of don't know option, which we do with most, if not all, of our questions, so we're not forcing people to give an answer, and around giving people the opportunity to make comments. We do tend to use open text boxes for people to give their wider views. So I was picking up on one of the questions. With another one, Councillor Walton wants to know about can we do more to let people know that there are surveys about. We've kind of touched on that in some ways, talking about how we could work with councillors. It's always on our kind of have your say section on the website. We use more often than not, I think on every occasion really, we promote via social media. So we try to reach out to people that way. We do it via our networks, but also libraries as well. And I know the Councillor Walton asked about community notice boards. At the minute, we don't have a kind of network of community notice boards. And there would be resource implications with that, but it's possibly something we could look at if there's opportunities within our community centres, within our libraries, within our DHOs, our district housing offices, then maybe that is something we could consider as one of the improvements in the coming months. And also Councillor Walton asked about how much control we have over our surveys when we use things like Snap. We have control actually. So Snap is the platform rather than the kind of people who undertake the survey for us. So it's up to us then to compile our survey in the way we want. So yeah, we have a large amount of control over Snap surveys.
Great, fine. Thanks for answering those. I can see Councillor Joe Hill has got his hand up. Joe.
Oh, thanks very much. We've heard a lot about social media. I'm just wondering, do we still, you've just sort of answered a little bit of this, Lee. So do we still carry out public meetings, workshops, etc.? So I know still a lot of people would still prefer that face-to-face sort of engagement. And at the same time, when we talk about surveys, we all know if it's not going to be electronic and digital, and if it's coming through the letterbox, those bits of paper usually end up in the bin, at least a third of them anyway, or even more. So, and I do recognise that the national feedback on surveys and questionnaires is roughly about 30%, or it used to be around 30%. So I'm just wondering if there still is a place. I think you have answered it a little bit, that there still is a place for that public consultation. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hale. I think question 13 by Councillor Black and 14 by the Chair ask that. So I'll kind of jump to them if you want, Chair. So in terms of service specific, they've done face-to-face consultation on things like the Mumble seawall, our cultural strategy, and also on the future of our specialist teaching facilities. So that there are some kind of examples there. We also do a lot of face-to-face engagement with forums like the LGBTQ plus forum, our Aging Well steering group, the big conversation which we talked about a little earlier, but also our disability network. So there are things being done either by my corporate council-wide team or by services in a particular area. As and when the need arises, it isn't something we would do for everything, but where we think we need to engage public more closely on particular schemes, then that's where we tend to do face-to-face.
Thanks. And thanks. Leslie seems to have disappeared there, so with internet problems, and if she comes back on, but thanks for answering those. We can say that you have answered them. Peter, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just to follow up on that one. I mean, we talked to, as you say, we talked to existing groups. What about formal focus groups? I mean, focus groups is a art form in itself, of course, and you've got to get everything right, and sometimes you need professionals to run them. But have we considered doing focus groups in that sort of format before?
We did used to do them, Councillor Black, as part of our budget consultation, annual budget consultation. We haven't used them for some time. I think, first of all, the pandemic stopped us doing it for a couple of years. But then also, I think there's been a resource issue with kind of putting on focus groups, but I think they are being used, or they've been planned as part of our co-production activities. So that will form part of some of the work where we're doing some co-production. They'll actually bring in service users and do that kind of focus group style.
It just strikes me that might be particularly valuable in terms of the larger strategies, which are council-wide and affect a large number of services, as opposed to the budget, which is specific. Well, you get a group of people together. Do you want your council tax to go up? No. But if you talk in general terms about how they view their community and how their community can improve in terms of planning or in terms of environment, that sort of thing, that might be more valuable and more qualitative consultation.
Yep, I agree, Councillor Black, and I think there'll be a number of services who are doing that. I haven't captured that kind of activity in this report, but what I can do is, Chair, I can speak to some departments and see where they've been doing kind of focus group work, because I think there is some underway.
Great, fine. Thank you, and welcome back, Leslie. So you had some internet problems. Lee answered the questions because obviously we sent him the points you made, and we'll pick those up in the notes as well later. But thanks very much, and glad to see you back. Then no other hands up. The next question was in the report you gave the most recent survey, you said taking a slightly different approach, and this year we took the opportunity to take part in a national resident survey, Data Cymru survey. Are there many responses local to Swansea in that survey? Yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
Thank you, Chair. So we had this opportunity where the Welsh Government was inviting all 22 authorities to take part in a Data Cymru survey. It was basically the same questions for each local authority area, but you branded it specifically to your council and you promoted it as if it was your own. So that's just been completed. We had 1,344 responses, and they were all from Swansea. So Rian is now analysing the results. We've also got a meeting on the 14th with Data Cymru to do benchmarking. We're not sure how many of the 22 took part. We know a number did, it wasn't just us. So we'll be able to benchmark some of all of the findings against those who took part.
Fine, thanks. Do you think that was effective? The 1,300 isn't a huge number back.
It's around the figure that we get for things like our budget, and when we've gone out to residents in the past, it's usually just north of about 1,000 that we get in terms of responses. So it's pretty much bang on the money. I think what's really useful about it is, whereas we've done our own thing in the past, this is now giving us some benchmarking data that we can use. Same questions in other parts of Wales as well. And the other selling point was it was free. So we took advantage of this being a free opportunity, and we hope that the Welsh Government will repeat it in future.
Great. Obviously, gosh, if it's free, yeah, you want to take
Yes.
it. And 1,300 responses in that sense, that's obviously good. But
Yeah.
Peter's got his hand up.
Yeah, it's my follow-up question in a sense. I mean, 1,300 is about equivalent to a sample in an opinion poll. So in that sense, it can be, the margin of error is fairly small. But an opinion poll, they tend to balance out the respondents to try to get a cross section, which of course you couldn't do in the data company. So I'm just wondering what analysis has been made of the respondents in that data company survey in terms of ethnicity, postal code area, that sort of thing, economic status, that sort of thing. Are we anywhere near understanding whether that sample which we had is representative of the city as a whole?
It wouldn't be representative in the same way as if you employed someone like Maury, because it was an open invite for people to respond rather than go into a actual sample. But what we'll have is we'll have a breakdown based on things like sex and gender, age, religion, language. We've also got a breakdown per kind of socio-economic group in terms of areas of multiple deprivation. So we'll have that. We're just going through the figures now, so hopefully not too long we'll be able to provide further details.
So with that breakdown, you'd be able to sort of put together some sort of mathematical model to say, well, how closely it resembles the Swansea, etc. Yeah. The other thing, and this is, I think, true of all the online polls, do we tend to get better response from more affluent areas which have higher digital inclusion than we do, say, an area like mine or on the east of the river, an area which is more deprived?
Yeah, we've certainly, I think about half the responses were from the least deprived area in Swansea. So when you use the multiple deprivation index, about 610 responses were from the least deprived area. So there is an issue with that, Councillor Black. You are right, and it's something we need to look into.
Okay, thanks.
Great, fine. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sorry, just to add to that, Chair, the second most or the second highest response rate was from the most deprived area, so which was a lot smaller, but it was the second highest response rate. So we just need to explore some of those issues with Data Cymru to understand it a bit better.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very. Great, Leslie. You've got your hand up, and also, Lee answered most of your questions. The one about taking into account the available resources, he didn't. So if you'd like to ask that question now as well.
Which one it was? Let me just make the comment about the Wales-wide surveys. I always feel that if we're getting any feedback from anywhere, it's better than nothing. And it's it's information we can at least be aware.
It's a shame.
Yeah, I think Leslie's frozen again, actually. I think in the meantime, I think the point that Leslie made, though, was obviously it's free, and we're getting data that is important.
Yeah.
And any data we get is important. That is important for us to have. Can I go on to my next question, which is just from me? And are there any examples of using co-production? If you talk about co-production takes place, but can you give some examples? And if so, what was successful and what were the challenges?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. The two examples I can give, which I'm light on detail of because they take place in other parts of the authority, was the kind of development of the domestic abuse strategy and also the tackling poverty strategy. I've got the officers involved, who I can provide to Rachel, and maybe if you wanted to get further information from them, because I haven't got details of how that actually panned out and what proved to be successful. So I can give the officer details to Rachel, and perhaps you can get some information.
Great. No, that would be helpful, because it is obviously, when we did the equalities inquiry a couple of years ago, we met a range of groups, and some of them were involved in co-production, and it really is important to see that how we are involving those groups and what they're saying as well. Great, thank you. Any other questions on that? Otherwise, we're coming back to Peter.
It's non-stop, isn't it? Okay. Welsh speaking community. I mean, a lot of our efforts in terms of the Welsh language just tends to be making sure everything is bilingual interpretation. Do we have any specific targets or efforts to towards the Welsh speaking community, which is sort of separate from that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Black. So we've just developed our new Welsh language promotion strategy. We worked really closely with Mentor Iaith Abertawe on that. So there are some actions within that strategy, and I'd be happy to share that with members, share if they felt that was useful. But we would expect that as a result of that, our engagement and the opportunities with those Welsh speakers would actually increase as a result of the actions in the strategy.
Okay, and of course there are a lot of forums in the Welsh language which you can actually get into to get people to respond to surveys in that particular issue. Yeah,
that's right, Councillor Black. And at the minute, we're working with Mentor Iaith and also the Urdd in 2 locations in Swansea, where we've used grant from the WLGA and Welsh Government to encourage the uptake of Welsh language and the use of Welsh language in communities. So in those areas, we'll be trialling some ways of actually engaging Welsh speakers better, and then we can replicate what we've learned in other parts of Swansea.
Yeah. Can I ask a more general question in terms of strategies? Because I think it's quite important that when we have these strategies, that we do get as big a response as possible. I know the programme committee, the Scrutiny Programme Committee, this month is looking at the consultation on the poverty action, anti-poverty strategy. So I'm just wondering whether that whether they engage with you very early on in terms of how they can get the maximum response. And whether, in doing so, whether this happens all the time in terms of strategies coming from various different departments, have we got a proper cross-cutting approach to consultation so that your department is engaged every time?
I would say we're engaged most of the time, Councillor Black. There are instances where departments will carry out some consultation on their own, but by and large, they do come to my team either to help them draft the survey or to promote it. And Rhian becomes involved as a consultation coordinator, so she's got a kind of good feel for what's going on across the council. I mentioned recently about working with Waste on some of the changes they did prior to Christmas, and doing some consultation work with them, so we were able to do things. We're currently working with Lee Cambule, who is working on the Tackling Poverty strategy, and not only they come into us, we're actually learning from them as well. So the way Lee engages some of his networks in the poverty kind of forums, then we're learning from him as well. So there's a bit of a crossover of ideas. So we provide them kind of guidance and support, and at the same time we're nicking ideas off them as a corporate team as well.
I look forward to that at the Scrutiny Programme Committee. Lee can outline all these efforts then, can't he? Great, thank you.
Great, fine, thanks. Yeah, no, you don't want to reinvent the wheel, so it really is important to pick that up. Are there any other questions? Oh, there was the Leslie question. Yeah, which shall I read that out? Taking into account available resources, have we got the right mechanisms in place to gather feedback via other sources, e.g. focus groups, and to make sure that this is always understood as an equally important part of the results of any consultation alongside a survey?
Yeah, in terms of resource, it falls on to individual services. So Rhian as the kind of corporate consultation coordinator, as the kind of big corporate ones such as the budget, our annual survey, our staff survey, etc. And then she supports departments on their activities. So the resource for doing things like face-to-face engagement, how they actually use the results, how they analyse them, then tend to fall on the individual departments.
Any further points on that? Any other questions? Otherwise, can I welcome Amy Richmond-Jones? Amy has been very patiently waiting there in the wings. She does a similar role with communications for the Mid and West Wales Fire Service, and she very kindly agreed to come along and share with us some of the things that they do. So welcome, Amy. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Or
Thank
the
you,
airwaves are
members.
yours. I should say. Yeah.
So yeah, good afternoon, members. Thank you for the invitation to attend today's meeting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Amy Richmond-Jones and I'm the Engagement Planning and Performance Manager for the Fire Service. So as part of my role, I have responsibility for both the engagement and consultation on our improvement planning process, which is our community risk management plan and also our public opinion survey, known as the Have Your Say survey. So in collaboration with our communications and marketing team, we meet regularly to look for different ways to engage with our stakeholders. And some of these methods are not too dissimilar to those that we've heard from Lee earlier on in the meeting. So the use of our social media channels such as Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We like to use stories and include people within our posts. And we've also run various competitions over the years, which we feel has helped with our engagement as a little bit of an incentive, just to give something back to the people who are committing their time to provide feedback to us. We regularly boost our social media posts to try and target certain demographics and certain areas, particularly those seldom heard voices. And other methods that we use obviously are via our external website, our internal intranet. We do try and use informal internal forums and meetings. Like I regularly speak with our partnerships officer to see if she can share the information with her groups, and we provide that offer then of attending any meetings should they be required. Public services boards, we find those extremely helpful in promoting our key messages and also encouraging those members to share our information. Our authority members as well, and their subgroup committees, they're also very key in helping to communicate those messages out to their constituents. We also regularly attend external events such as the Winter Fair, which is on in Builth Wells at the latter part of the year. So we go up there for 2 days with our community safety teams and try and engage with it. They're predominantly like the farming community on our proposals. And then more recently, we've committed a small budget to doing some paid promotion via Wales Online, a company called Global Reach and Local IQ, who have been promoting our consultations via their own social media pages and through the use of newspaper articles. I regularly liaise with our internal staff groups, such as our community safety teams, our fire crews and on-call firefighters, to encourage them to distribute leaflets and raise awareness of any consultation and engagement events within their local areas, just recognising that they've got touch points within those communities that we may not necessarily be aware of or have access to, which has also proved to be quite popular in widening our reach within the communities. We've got a stakeholder list which we regularly share information with, and also our monthly newsletter called Cal on Tan, which we use to promote these events. And more recently, as part of our Objective 6, which sits in our community risk management plan, we've got an engagement and in particular how we engage with our communities objective, which is purely focused on the messages that we send out, the initiatives that we develop, and basically ensuring that we listen to the voices to help them shape the services that we deliver. As part of that group, we've established a network of community ambassadors. So this is in its infancy at the moment, and to date we've got 15 people registered. So the aim of the network is to act as a liaison between the service and their local communities, and also share information with them, and they basically act as a bit of a critical friend to some of the work that we're doing. We use our fire cadets, recognising that obviously it's important to engage with the younger generations and capture their views and feedback. And we're also in the process of trying to liaise with the young persons parliaments across the 6 areas that we cover to see if they would like to form part of our Objective 6 meetings going forward. So other events that we attend, obviously, are fire station open days, car washes, the Eisteddfod, Royal Welsh, where there's obviously a considerable amount of footfall, and we find those events are an ideal opportunity really to share our key messages and just try and gather some views and feedback from members of the public. More recently, our Deputy Chief Fire Officer has also undertaken a series of station roadshows where he's visited all of the stations within our service area to speak directly to them about our community risk management plan, and again, gather views and feedback from those on the front line. And then finally, just to touch on it, we did, again, as part of Objective 6, we did make contact with the Consultation Institute prior to them ceasing trading to be able to get some advice from them. So we're in the process of liaising with a consultant called Kathy from KG Strategies, who's been providing advice and guidance in relation to the current community engagement programme that we're undertaking, which in my opinion has been really invaluable, and we've learned some considerable key lessons there in helping us on our journey to communicating with our communities. And I think that's it, Chair, to be honest. Sorry, it's a bit of a canter through, but I think this is something that does evolve. We try and undertake an evaluation at the end of each piece of communication and engagement, just to identify what's worked well and what hasn't worked so well, and try and implement alternative methods then to each campaign that we run. So yeah, happy to take any questions, and thanks again for allowing me to attend today's meeting.
Great, thanks, thanks, Amy. Are there any questions to Amy? Or interesting points, though, obviously a different organisation, and obviously you were the Mid and West Wales Fire Authority covering a larger sort of area, but nevertheless interesting to listen to what you had to say. If there aren't any questions, well, that's excellent news for you. But oh yes, so hang on, we've got Peter. Peter's coming in.
I think it'd be rude to let Amy go without asking you a question. Just interested in terms of the sort of responses you're getting to your consultations. Obviously, you obviously carry out a consultation on your budget and maybe on your strategies as well. What sort of responses do you tend to get on that, and how representative are they of the huge area that you cover?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Councillor Black. In terms of our survey responses, I will be completely honest, they aren't great. We don't get a great response to them. So what we try and focus on now is those engagements and those conversations that we have with people and capturing that information from them. I think just recognising that, in my opinion, I think there is a lot of consultation fatigue, and people aren't always necessarily happy to complete the survey, but they're happy to have a chat with us and provide that feedback. So we always ensure that we capture that, and that is fed in then. But yeah, the survey responses are increasing year on year, but then they're not great and not where we would like them to be. We're probably looking in a region of 500 each time we go out.
Okay, thanks.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I think Amy has perfectly illustrated the significance and importance of getting out into the various communities, and it's something we should learn from, really. So yeah, that is just a comment, that's all, that we can learn a lot from her work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Fine. Thank you, Mark. And Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much. And yes, thanks, Amy. And just to reiterate Mark's point, really, our busiest day when we have all our fun in the sun during the summer is when the fire engines turn up. And it's, you know, and there is so many people there. You're talking maybe sometimes during a day or during half a day, maybe at least maybe 200 people over that period. And that's mums and dads with the kids. So that really is quality engagement. Thanks very much. And well done.
Yeah, great. Thanks, thanks, Joe. Any other questions for Amy? No. Well, great. Thank you very much, Amy, and thanks for sparing the time to join us. So thanks. We've, as I said, we've been through the various questions, so you can escape now if you like. Actually,
Thank you very
what we
much,
are
Chair.
going to do is we're going to look at the various conclusions and. Obviously we'll be dropping a note to the leader or the cabinet minister, in this case, responsible. So, but thank you, and Lee as well.
No problem. Thank you again
you
for
can
the
escape.
opportunity. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, and thank you, Lee. Yeah. One thing I should have said is actually, when declaring an interest, I am actually a member of the Mid and West Wales Fire Authority. I think we better make a note of that. But no, that was interesting to see a slightly different take on some of the things as well. So during the course of the meeting, Rachel has been busily taking notes. Are there any? We'll prepare a letter and send that out to everybody, for your points. But have you any particular points you want to include in that letter, or do you want to wait to see the letter and then you can sort of add points at that stage? Peter.
Yeah, I think the use of focus groups is something which we should be considered on larger consultation relating to council-wide strategies in particular. I think that would be much more useful. I mean, Lee said he's open to that, and I think it'd be useful to press them on that and say that's something which they should be looking at. I think that better use of councillor networks was also quite. I raised in the example of dogs on the beach, where Sam Bennett basically wrote to every single constituent and told them this survey, and they had 4,000 responses as a result of that. So, I mean, if I'm alerted to a survey, I put it on my local Facebook group, and I'm sure you do similar. So, I mean, I think better use of councillor networks to get ideas, to highlight these surveys and get people engaged would also be useful as well, I think, as part of that. And I mean, it's difficult to do face-to-face consultation, and I suppose there is an issue with digital exclusion in the city, and we do tend to rely very heavily on digital consultations. So we do need to find a way to get around that digital exclusion particularly in terms of the older generation. I'm talking now as a 65-year-old who uses a lot of digital stuff, but I think we do need to consider how we overcome that digital exclusion which still exists in the city. I don't know what the percentage is, but it must be at least 10%.
Fine, thanks. Yeah, I think you almost, as you say, have to go to them very often, and you've got to look at a vehicle of doing that. Joe, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it's really interesting what Mid and West Wales have been doing. And it is quite traditional. But if we could take an element of that and target the audience, as in what Peter is saying about focus groups. So we need to know our audience, and we then need to target our audience if we're going to have good engagement. And on digital exclusion, I was going to ask a question, but I thought it was a no-brainer. Really, I'm presuming that our communications team and our engagement teams, they do study the ward profiles. So we know who our target audience is, or we know where the gaps may be. Especially, I think on the east side, St Thomas, I think we've got roughly about, I don't know, I think it's 40% over 50s. So I'm hoping that that's done as part of that strategy, but I'm not sure that it is. I should have really asked the question, but there you go. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. What we will do is put that in the letter. So whilst you didn't ask the question, then we can put that in and get a reply. Peter, you've got your hand up.
I was going to say, I think they do tend to have paper copies of surveys in local libraries, but I'm not sure how many people are aware of that. Or, you know, are the library staff hoisting them on people as they come in, or do people come in? I'm not sure if there is paper copies available in, say, the district housing offices and in libraries. What's the take up of that? And that might be one way of looking at how that digital exclusion. I think the point about the preamble is very important. I mean, seriously, I very nearly abandoned the budget scrutiny. There was about 3 or 4 pages of just graphs and bar charts and stuff, and I thought, well, and maybe I'm not going to go for this, but so I think that puts people off. So I think we do have to look at how we design these surveys as well. I think that's quite important. And the other thing I was going to say, the Data Cymru survey, I think, has been very instructive, and I think would be useful to them to feed back to us the outcome of that survey, and particularly what lessons they've learned from it, and whether we could use something similar in future.
Great, thank you, Peter. And also on that point, really, the comparisons to other councils as well, to see what they think, local people in those areas think the issues are as well, which could be quite interesting. The other thing I think I would say is that it's really important as well as you mentioned, and in fact, Mark and Joe, about the fact that we do need to use our councillor networks as well to get out into the communities, because we've all got ways that we're using social media and meeting people, and I think it's quite important to use that to get those results, to build up the information we get. But all the points that you've obviously raised, we can include that in the letter. And any other points you'd like to raise? No. Right. If that's the case, can I say thank you very much for attending. We'll get on and get a copy of this letter out to you all, and we can then have we can include all those points in that letter. So thanks very much for attending this afternoon, and have a very pleasant rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thanks very much. Ta-ra.